All right, well, in the shop today we have my grandmother's old 1984 Monte Carlo SS. We are going to be finally cleaning the 20 years of grime off the outside of this thing and out of the inside of this thing. The car seems to be in really good shape, but it is covered in 20 years of filth because it has been sitting for the last 20 years. So we brought this thing home from Georgia. I finally had the opportunity to buy it. I've wanted this car since I was a little kid and my grandma drove me around in it. We picked it up in Georgia, drug it out of a carport, brought it down here, and we did a little tune-up on it, got it running and driving pretty solid. There's a couple more bugs to work out, but it runs, it drives, it fires up nicely. So now it's time to make it look the part. We're gonna get it cleaned up. We're gonna get the decal set back on it. We're gonna get the trim rings back on the wheels. It should be a pretty massive transformation of this thing. I cannot wait to see the end result inside and out. So that being said, we got a pretty big task ahead of us, so let's get this thing backed out of the shop and get to cleaning. All right, guys, before we get too deep into today's video, I wanted to talk to you about today's video sponsor, Factor. So Factor has been life-changing for Chrissy and I because we've been trying really hard to clean up our eating routine, to eat healthier as a whole, and to save money on takeout. Any money that we save gets to go into car parts and going racing. So, it's kind of a win-win for me. However, the problem is we both have careers that are our hobbies and thus they consume our entire lives. Now, it's great because we enjoy what we're doing, we love what we do. However, it means there's just not much time left at the end of the day to do anything else. And thus we default to the easiest option. And that is where Factor comes in. We get fresh, quality, never frozen meals delivered right to our door that are super flavorful, might I add. Oh, they're delicious. And they're ready in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It's amazing. I can be out here working till 9:30, push through to get a project done, and then I can be inside eating at 9:32. I mean, you just can't beat it. It has been incredible. And one of the really neat things for someone like me who travels a lot, goes racing, and my schedule's all over the place, I don't have a set 9 to 5, I can adjust my order size, I can skip a week if I need to, I can order extra if I need to. So Chrissy and I have found a perfect balance between Factor and HelloFresh. When we know we're gonna have a little more time during the week, we can get a little more HelloFresh and a little less Factor, but when we know it's gonna be a crammed week, we'll get more Factor because we know we're not gonna have as much time. And between those two, we're good to go. And fortunately, Factor is actually owned by HelloFresh, so I can give you a discount code regardless of which one fits your lifestyle more. So speaking of discount codes, if you're interested in trying it out, which I would highly recommend, go to factor75.com or click the link down in the description and use code TaylorDrift60 to get 60% off your first box. That's factor75.com, use code TaylorDrift60 for 60% off your first box. It's a really good deal and a really way to kind of dip your toes in the water and see if you're sold, which I can tell you, you're probably gonna be sold if you're like me, because it's revolutionary for my life and being able to eat healthy and save time and save money. It's sick all around. So anyway, that being said, check it out if you're interested. But for now, we need to get back to work. Let's get this thing tidied up. All right, it's time. It's time to wash off 20 years of filth, but also 20 years of history. The car has been sitting for 20 years and we're about to erase all of that. So I wanted to take one last look at it before we clean it up for good. So with just the pressure washer alone, no scrubbing, no hand, no elbow grease, just spraying it off with the pressure washer, we've already got a pretty drastic difference. I mean, it is night and day from before. A lot of that crud came off just with the force of the pressure washer. But obviously, we've got to put some elbow grease in now. We've got to get to scrubbing this thing and washing it like you normally would a car. Now, I'm not sure how well it's going to clean up. I'm a little bit conflicted. I could go either way. So I'm going to move this thing into the shade. If you live in Florida, you'll understand. If not, you might not realize that even in the winter here, the sun is so powerful that it will just completely cook the soap before you can even rinse it off. You can only do, one panel at a time before the soap's burned to the paint. So we like to try to keep the cars in shade when you do wash them. Now, I've never been accused of washing my cars too often. You'll never hear somebody say that about me. It's just not my thing. It's not that I like having dirty cars or I don't care. It's just I enjoy washing cars when they're really dirty, and you get the huge satisfaction of seeing with every brush of the sponge that you're cleaning it, and you can tell that you're cleaning it, and you could see things happening. When it's just barely dirty and you can't even tell you're making a difference, that's when I have a hard time doing it. So, I mean, that's my excuse at least. So we're getting into scrubbing this thing, and fortunately, it is coming off. A lot of this crud's coming off. Now, ironically, the dirtier side is actually getting cleaner than the clean side, the side that had already been cleaned a little bit. So I don't know if it's just that the dirt was helping kind of protect everything or what, but fortunately, the majority of it's coming off. Now, as we get to the back, there are some spots that they're not coming off with just some elbow grease and some soap, a traditional car wash style. We know we're going to have to use some different chemicals to get in there and get that stuff off. But as a whole, it is cleaning up nicely. Washing it with the soap and the sponge, really you're starting to see some of the shine come out, and I think we've got pretty good paint to work with here, which is great news. So I even took the extra step to pressure wash out the wheel wells and get some of that Georgia clay out of there while we have the chance to do so. All right, well, here is where we're at after just a regular wash. Pressure washed everything, cleaned everything with some soap. The majority of it is pretty good. The roof back here is still pretty good. We got to clean the jams out of the trunk, so we're getting it dirty again. But all in all, it's looking good. We're going to pull it in the shop. Fire on up. Oh. There you go. She's not running her best right now. We got a EGR delete that we got to do. All right, we got this thing back in the shop in the AC, and man, it came out really solid. Josue's got some bug and tar remover, trying to get some of this stuff off. Yeah, it's all open. So it's coming out. Thank God Josue's here. He's way more thorough with things than I am when it comes to cleaning. I'm like, hey, it's 90% of the way there, we're good. But I expected it to be this good underneath, so I'm not surprised. But it is nice to see that there's a pretty clean car underneath there. We are gonna have to address the surface rust on the door here. That's the one spot. I wonder why it did it there and nowhere else. Strange, but I'm gonna move on to the interior, get all these parts out of there, and start cleaning this up. We got some mold on the seats. This is gonna need a nice thorough detail. Enough jibber jabber, we're gonna get back to work. All right, well, we're getting there, slowly but surely. Josue's got a lot of the crud off the trunk here. See, it's looking pretty spiffy. Most of this came out. Man, it's looking snazzy, dude. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I'm stoked. And the interior's coming along nicely. Got it vacuumed out. I've still got to do all the panels. You know, these back panels back here, the door panels, more of the steering wheel. I've already done some of the steering wheel to get the stickiness off of it. Need to wipe down the dash. I got more to do in here, but something that's a little more important that I want to do really quickly is a mechanical thing we have left. So down here, you can see that silver tape. So that is where the EGR valve would go. Now the EGR valve was gone, so I just taped over it for the meantime, but we keep blowing the tape off. It doesn't last long at all. The car will run all right, and then at one point it just blows the tape off. And then now you have a massive vacuum leak and what sounds like a giant exhaust leak, which after looking under the car on the lift again after the first drive, I didn't see any obvious exhaust leaks. There was a port where some of the smog stuff went down into the cat, so I capped that off. That might have been it. So if we can fix this, we'll know for sure if we have any exhaust leaks, and the car should run a whole lot better than it is right now with a massive vacuum leak. So they sell little plates for that, but they don't have them in stock, so we're gonna make our own. Just use this as a template. Hopefully we have the bolts. That's the only question mark, because they are gonna be standard, pretty much guaranteed. I don't have much standard hardware. I have a ton of metric stuff. Either way, we're gonna whip up a little plate for this, get this knocked out. One more thing off the checklist. So let's get to cutting and grinding. We shouldn't have to do any welding, but hey, I haven't done a fab project in a while. I'm itching. I'll take anything. I'll take what I can get. So fortunately we had the gasket, which saved me a lot of time because I didn't have to make a cardboard template. So we just traced that over to some aluminum and started cutting it out on the bandsaw. It's a pretty straightforward, simple shape, and now we've got our rough shape. So we need to move over to the belt grinder to grind it down and clean it up a little bit. Now, everything we're doing with this car in relation to this engine, it's all temporary. You know, we intend to swap a different engine in this car, so we don't want to go too crazy. We don't need to spend that much time making things absolutely perfect as if we plan to keep this forever. But we've got to make it good enough so that it works. Otherwise, we won't be able to enjoy it in the meantime. So it's definitely a balancing act between spending enough time to get the job done right and not wasting time we don't need to waste on something that's going to get tossed anyway. So once I had the plate made, it's time to toss it back on the engine and get this thing sealed up. Now, while I was doing this, Josue was getting in all the cracks and crevices, and I realized that I was right and I did not have the bolts. But what I do have is a ton of metric hardware. As I said, got plenty of options there. So I decided, you know what, again, same story. We're not keeping this engine long term. I'm just going to retap these bolts to M8 by 125 because they're basically the same. They're very close, just a slightly different thread pitch, and fortunately it worked. There was enough meat there to retap it. The M8 bolts threaded in nicely. So now we just need to silicone up our plate and get it in position and get it bolted on so that we can seal this pesky vacuum leak / exhaust sounding vacuum leak once and for all. I'm so tired of this thing sounding like it's got open headers on it because of this. Our plate is on. It's mint, it is siliconed. We're gonna have to let that cure overnight just to make sure we don't suck it down in the engine. Not that I think it would care, but you know, just to be thorough. Very curious to see how this thing runs without a giant hole in the intake as a vacuum leak. I had to retap the holes because ain't nobody got time to go to the hardware store, chase down some random standard size bolts. It's so weird because even newer, you know, this age American car still had standard stuff, but even like a 2000 American car usually is all metric. So I have all of this hardware, bags and bags and bags of hardware, but it's all metric. So usually I have the exact size I need of whatever I need, but when it's standard, not so much. So anyway, I'm gonna get back to it. And tomorrow we can maybe drive this thing clean and running proper, fully proper. That'd be exciting. So the next morning, before I worried about firing this thing up and driving it, I wanted to complete my task of cleaning the interior because I knew I probably wouldn't come back to it. Though interiors are kind of my favorite thing to have clean. You know, I don't mind the outside of a car being a little dusty, but I cannot stand dirty interiors because that's where I'm at when I'm driving the car. So I wanted to do a really, really thorough job on the interior interior. That way we could kind of do it once and then just maintain it after this. So even getting into the vents and everything, I mean, this thing has sat for a long time, so there's dirt and grime and dust every single place it could possibly be. So with the cabin all finished up, all that's left is to vacuum out the dirtiest part of the car, the trunk. This is where all the parts were stored, so it's usually what gets the dirtiest. So we got that vacuumed up, cleaned up, looking nice, and with that, we have a clean interior. I love the interiors of these cars, so I'm really happy to see this one all cleaned up. And now it's time to see if this thing runs any better with our homemade EGR block-off plate. We've got our tedious work done. Let's get to the fun stuff, hopefully. All right, moment of truth here. Should I pump it or should I not pump it? Should we see if it'll do it without pumping it? I feel like if I pump it, it'll start first try. All right, we're not gonna pump it. No pump. Oh, so close. She needs a little pump. She needs a couple pumps. It's okay. She's old. Oh, okay. Maybe she doesn't want to idle great when she's old. So after coaxing it and helping it a little bit to get up to idle, it was idling, but now we had a new problem. It was idling high with a screeching alternator belt. So I decided I wanted to fix the alternator belt first and then worry about the idle. So I was tinkering with it. I tried to let it warm up. I backed it out of the shop to go for a drive and realized that there was no point. It was idling at 2,000 RPM. So we've got to dig back into this assortment of vacuum lines and solenoids and hoses and caps and see if we can find what's causing our vacuum leak and get it sorted out, because there's just no point in driving it as it is now. And this has been a reoccurring problem, but you know, it's a 40-year-old car with a bunch of rubber. So fortunately, we got it to idle better. Not perfect, but better. You got it. So as I was backing the car out, as soon as I turned around and looked for it, I spotted a major problem. Drove this thing right back into the shop and we put it on the lift, because what I saw was a giant puddle of oil and a trail of oil following us down the driveway. We have a major leak. This isn't a pan gasket. This isn't something small. I mean, it is spraying oil out with pressure and with volume. So we have got to figure this out before we do anything with this car. So looking under it with it on the lift, it looks like it's coming from above the oil filter housing. So I went up top to see if I could spot the rough area, but it's hard to tell. Everything's soaked. You can get a good idea, but the best way was to start it up. And with it fired up, I mean, I could see it streaming out from right behind the intake manifold. And about the only thing that could cause that is our oil pressure switch. So this switch controls the electric choke and the AC clutch. Basically, it tells whether the engine is running or not and is wired through that circuitry. So it's an important switch. Now, I swapped in an 1/8 MPT plug I had just because I couldn't get the switch till the next day, and that did fix our leak. So I went and got the switch, and now it's time to replace it. There's quite a few things we have to take apart to get to it, just some brackets and hoses and hard pipes, but all in all, it's not too bad to get to. And it's just one of those things. It's always ironic when you finish something with a car and then you go out and something else breaks, but that's just part of it with these older cars, especially ones like this that have been sitting for a long time, because as the years go by, even if you're not driving it, these parts are wearing out and they're wearing out, and sometimes they're on their last leg, and it just takes a couple drives to push it over the edge. And that's just part of it. That's just the name of the game. So we've just got to keep finding these little problems and keep driving it and finding more problems. I'm sure there will be more that will show up and rear their ugly head, but we'll just fix them one by one. I mean, that's about all we can do. All right, well, let's try to start this thing, see if it still runs, see if it still doesn't have an oil leak. I'm not fully confident because that switch, it's got a pretty tall head on it, and when you run it all the way down, it makes contact with the intake manifold. So I had to switch from thread sealer to thread tape so I could thicken it up and basically get it to tighten up earlier, but I wasn't able to get it super tight, so I'm a little concerned. I trusted that plug more than I trust this to work, but hey, we'll see. Hopefully it works. We got the cruise control servo back on, everything buttoned back up. Hopefully we don't have to take it back apart. We still got to do the belt, but I just want to see if it starts. really annoying. Well, it's still idling. I'll have to mess with that again. Feels good to see this thing out in the sunlight, all cleaned up. You can never tell what a car really looks like in the shop. It's not until you get it outside, and man, I gotta say, this thing cleaned up so good. The paint most of the way around looks really good. It's shiny. Oh, what a difference this made. For a simple wash and a little bit of elbow grease, this thing looks like an entirely different car. And we've still got some more to do. Still got the graphics, still need to clean up our plastic, bring that back. We're not done yet, but I just wanted to take a look at it in the sunlight, all cleaned up. It feels really nice to hop in this thing now and the interior be clean. You can see out of the windows. I am so pleased with how this cleaned up. Especially the interior. I mean, there's hardly a blemish in here. It looks just like it did 20 years ago. I'm stoked, man. I'm so happy with this thing. It's come a long way in a short amount of time. So, you know what? Before we bring it back in, we need to get on to installing the graphics so we can get that done while we still have daylight. But before we do that, let's just go take it for a quick little drive. I just want to drive it all cleaned up and see how it feels. Actually, wish it would idle normal. I don't know why that's been our biggest challenge. Seem to get it right, and then it's not good again. I can't figure out where I want this dang steering wheel. I guess school bus driver it is. Oh, it feels good to drive this thing around all cleaned up. And without major leaks. Oh, I can't stop smiling. This thing feels good. Just gotta fix that pesky idle. If it weren't for that, this thing would be running pretty much perfect right now. Before we move on to the stripes, I'm gonna get these guys on here. So I gotta go grab a few more lug nuts. We can only get 3 when I picked up the car. Oh, that looks way better. Now, these aren't the right size tires. These are just what my cousin could get at the time. And when we get to phase 2, we're gonna be using different wheels and tires anyway. Yeah, that is much, much better. Oh, it looks so much nicer with those, even with the little tiny tires on it. That's what I remember this thing looking like. The missing beauty rings are throwing it off. Now, we just need to get the decals on. This is gonna be the real fun part. So we have an OEM package of them, but I wanna save those. 1, they might not be any good anymore, and 2, I don't wanna mess them up. Imagine you're not gonna be able to find those anymore. But we have a set that I ordered. So not only do we have the Monte Carlo SS decals, but we also have the blue and black stripe that goes around the whole car, the border stripe. So pretty excited. This should make a pretty big difference. Now, obviously at some point we're gonna have to repaint this door and clean up that rust. But that's low on my priority list. For now, I want it to look like a true Monte Carlo SS. I always love the way these looked with the decals. So worst case, if we gotta order another set or another pair, once we get the door painted, that's okay. All right, we got our decals laid out and organized so we know for sure what goes where. We got this whole side taped up. Everything looks good. Everything fits. So now it's time to just install. And it's gonna be a little tricky because some of our body lines don't match up perfectly. You can see the door is a bit lower than the fender here, but I'm not going for perfection. I'm just going for halfway decent. Now, this is not my forte, so I'm gonna have to really try to not screw this up. Let's get to it. So as I said, stickers, decals, they're just not my forte. They're not my thing. They're not something that I'm good at. Now, I've been forced to get better at it because at drift events, we have to put windshield banners on our car and you have to run whatever one for that event. So I'm constantly changing those out. And through that, I have forcibly got some practice, but it is just not my thing. I'm good at having patience when it comes to fabrication projects and wiring, but I just can't spend 5 times longer to put a sticker on to prevent an air bubble or get it perfectly straight when I know that deep down, I'm not gonna notice the difference. If I don't notice the difference, I don't really care if someone else does. Now that being said, this is gonna be a border around the entire car. So it doesn't take it being off very much for it to be off a noticeable amount. So I'm taking my time, I'm trying my best. We start here on the bad side because that way, ideally, we'll have the method down on these particular graphics by the time we get to the good, nice looking side. So fortunately, these are going on pretty easy. We got the first side done in no time. These are really well done graphics. You know, they laid down really nice, but they also, the way they did the transfer tape gives you basically the border to line it up with. So it makes it really easy to get it in place. Now, when we get to the front bumper here, I really don't know how you're supposed to do this part right. I mean, it was tricky to get around that corner. I'm sure a professional could do it. I'm sure most people are probably better than me at putting stickers on, so they could probably do it, but I struggled with it. That was the one area where I messed it up. But we've got through side one, we've got a whole side done and the front bumper. Now we just need to get down the good side. Now this is the side we don't want to screw up. However, something that tends to happen when you're doing something is you get just to that point where you think, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, I've got the method down, I'm good, I'm chilling, I'm cruising through it, and that's when you screw up. And that's what I did. I started the long border, of course the longest one, a little too far back on the passenger side here, and there's a little bit more gap in the front. So I screwed that up, I did. It's one of those things, you see this in motorsports, you see this everywhere. You get to that point where you think you're doing good and you think you've got it under control, and that's usually where you make a mistake because you're not overanalyzing all the steps. But hey, we got it done. It's good enough for me. I won't notice it too much. I mean, I know it's there, so I'm gonna notice it more, but we'll forget about it. It'll be okay. We're done. All right, well, we did it. The cleanup phase of the project is complete. I love seeing the blue SS badge when you get a little glimpse of the interior with it. Oh, what a snazzy unit, man. I am so happy with how this thing cleaned up. I mean, I had confidence it would, but to see the end result with the stripes, the paint clean, the beauty rings on the wheels and the center caps, just tying everything together, seeing this car complete as it was, definitely very satisfying. Oh, what a difference that made. If it weren't for that rust on the bottom of this door, this thing would be primo. Regardless, I'm very happy with it. This thing is looking so good. I normally save the aesthetics for last, but it is easier to be motivated on a car when you get into a big project when you're happy with how it looks. Ah, man, wow. She cleaned up good. She definitely cleaned up good. That being said, it is getting dark yet again. We are pretty much out of time. I'm gonna wrap up a couple little things, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. Let me know what you guys think of the cleanup and the end result. What do you think of how the car looks now? I'm stoked. I'm blown away by how well this cleaned up. So I'm really pumped. Now really all that's left is to hopefully get my grandmother to drive it, but just really put it on the road and drive it while we collect the parts for phase 2. We need to enjoy it a little bit as is though. So that being said, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I sure hope I'll get to see you next time. Goodbye.